What's up, everybody? My name is Steven Sanchez. If you're watching me for the first time here on Patreon, thank you for your support, because that's the only way you'll be able to watch me is through the subscription department. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna jump straight in and talk about tutorials and what's gonna make certain things look like other things. And by things, I mean shapes. Okay, so if anybody has seen episode 16 of Drawing Laughs, this is the piece I was illustrating on there. Barracks' Minions, once again, still developing this bad boy. If you've seen the other videos on Patreon, you know that I've been developing this son of a gun for quite a while. Now, we're gonna dive in a little bit deeper into some tutorial stuff. Probably some of the stuff you may be interested in, or it could be boring. And it's very simple. Everything starts with a shape, right? So it's gonna get juicy in a second. Hang on a second. So we have the circle, we have the square, and we have the almighty triangle. And if you haven't understood any of this, rewind it, play it back. It'll make you feel nice and toasty. All right, now we have the lines, okay? This is the most basic of starting off points when starting to illustrate. If you're just starting to learn how to illustrate, focus on this, but there's more to it, okay? Because we have something called pressure control. In my PDF, which I'm going to update, there's an old PDF I put out a couple of years ago where I focus on the technique of pressure control, right? And what happens is your control of the pencil is key to mastering the drawing form, so you can understand how much pressure to put into certain aspects and what your mind is going to put together cohesively to make an image look like something, which is going back to circle, square, and triangle. So these shapes form into what's going to be body parts, objects, and overall an image. Now you can find, this is a mixture of both, because I was trying to do two things at the same time, but that didn't really work out. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna do this instead. See that? So you have the arm, and you have a joint, and then the center line, which also helps out. These elements right here are pretty much going to be your best friends, okay? So if you have any best friends right now, call them up and say, sorry, not gonna happen, guy. You're my best friend since we were children's, not anymore. Drawing is gonna be your best friend, because these shapes right here will inevitably make you a better artist, because you're understanding what's happening with all these little shapes here. And if you have those little mannequins, because I think they sell them at Michael's. If you're in America, then you can find these things at Michael's or online. They're pretty expensive. I have no idea why they're expensive. It's just like little maquettes of the human anatomy, which to a certain extent doesn't bend as well as it looks like it does. So what I'm doing here is a light gestured sketch of just one of those maquettes standing. But I mean, personally, you don't need it. Just know the extending, or rather the lengthening of where things are. Like, let's say, for example, let me tighten up the outline first, and we'll talk more about outlining and how important this is going to be for later usage, especially when character designing, because you can really get a sense and feel of the character quickly when outlining, because it's just so much more fun to get something to look at before you actually illustrate something too tightly. And let me finish this up. All right, cool. So we have something like this, and we'll add a neck. And for the sake of not erasing, you get the point where the head is, right? Okay, so let's say you have something like this. We'll leave the footsies for later, which, you know, there's triangles, stuff like that. Okay, very simple. Now what we're gonna do is, and the triangle. All right, cool. So did the outline. This way you get a general idea of what's happening here with all these forms, because you're gonna see the joints. And I just like to add a little plus because it's just so much more simpler to see where those joints are. It doesn't matter how you add the plus, as long as you just add the plus in the middle, okay? And then there's a little joint in here, a little joint in here. There we go. And then you got the, it's sort of like a G.I. Joe. You guys remember G.I. Joe? And the neck joint, okay? So it's very simple for you to attack your artwork this way and utilize this. You don't have to draw beautiful in the beginning. Matter of fact, I encourage you not to try to draw great. The first thing when anybody comes to illustration, the first thing they want to do is draw, right? And this is pretty much what you're going to be seeing a lot of. Okay, am I hitting the nail on the head yet? This is what you're going to see. You see this chicken scratch? And I'm not lifting up my pencil. This is just years of me doing this when I was a kid. Okay, and since I don't know where the muscle structure is, then things get weird, and not in a good way. Okay, so you get stuff like this. It's like, oh, it's an arm, right? You're gonna get this weird chicken scratch that is now not the greatest thing to look at. Okay, you don't know lighting, you don't know shading, you don't know pressure control. Pressure control is key. This right here is pressure control. Yes, you can use a mechanical pencil like the Pentel Graph Gear 1000. This is a number 9 HB lead, just in case you're wondering. Normally people do. What you want to do is you want to control the pressure from your wrist, okay? Now, depending on how you hold your pencil, those line strokes are going to be different. Me, I use the trifecta, okay? Right here, the pressure controls are at these points, 1, 2, and 3, and I can control that. But I'm also mindful of my wrist, the back end of my wrist here, okay? I keep slight pressure, and I utilize my shoulder up here to create that gimbal system, okay? So I don't put too much pressure on the sheet with my palm. I'm actually just going in a nice circular motion and adding just the right amount of pressure, utilizing my pinky as balance, okay? You ever see those artists who will put like a big stick and then they'll lean their body on something to paint? You know, it'll be a paintbrush and they'll paint cars with it. Normally is used when they're doing that, or they're doing a massive canvas. That's exactly what's happening here, is that I'm using my pinky as that balance, okay? That balance is gonna help me get those lines that I need, okay? Same thing here. Down here, I'm gonna have to devise a way to get a camera down here so you guys can see the amount of pressure and how loose I am on the sheet. But this is a great practice. See that? Even on the desk, it's nice and smooth. So be mindful of how much pressure you're adding, and then you can control this top portion up here while you move your hand around. See that? Nice even strokes. See that? Because pressure control is going to allow you to understand blending later down the line. Blending is going to be key for you along with lighting. When you have lighting and blending together, you're going to start producing really neat stuff, okay? So let's say, for example, we know that the light source is right here. We'll put a triangle, and we're going to put an arrow saying light, S-O-U-R-C-E. So we know that the light source is coming from that angle, and we'll shade this up real quick, and you can use your finger to smudge it out real nice and everything. But right now we're utilizing the pencil to practice with the shade, because the pencil is what's going to help you understand pressure control, okay? So I can do the same thing with the finger. The finger I'm applying a certain amount of pressure to make it darker or softer as it goes out into the light. But right now, we're just gonna utilize the pencil. See, and this is a slight technique where you do kind of a scribble look. And you see that? So now it's adding a little bit more texture, but you gotta be very gentle with it. It's kind of like a whisper. You're whispering with your pencil, okay? So now you can see that there's a light source. Now I feel like, okay, that looks too dark and this is too light. So we need a little bit more. So I'm gonna be very mindful and darken it from down here and just slightly lighten it. See that? Now this pressure control is gonna allow me to balance the shade point. And be creative with it as long as you get that shade looking the way it's supposed to. I don't care if you go left, right, up, down, it doesn't matter. See, that's just with the pencil. There is no finger rubbing, okay? Practice with the pencil first is gonna get to this point. When you start getting that nice shade of gray and white, then after you start mastering this, then you can start using your finger to shade certain things in, to get things going. For example, here's a quick technique for shading. Put in your nice soft lead, and HB lead is just fine. Use your finger, just rub right on top of it so you can pick up some of that lead, and then go to another section and then rub with a little bit of pressure, and there you have a nice little shaded point. Okay, and if you want, you can draw around that, and now you have a nice shaded point there. Grab your eraser, add a highlight, add a little dot next to it, and now you have a nice little look here. Right here. So it looks like some type of water or marble. Because sometimes you'll see a reflecting part of the surface in the water. And this is the stuff I used to do back in the 80s and 90s. Woof, I'm old. Right? And you'll do stuff like this, and you start to be creative with your shading. You know, back then you had to just draw barbarian swords and all that good stuff. So now you have something like this that you got from simply doing something like this, which is pressure control. I can't stress enough how important pressure control is. Pressure control is going to allow you to do things like this with shapes, like this, like in the beginning, because it's going to allow you to get a better, smoother line instead of doing the whole wobbly look because you can't draw a straight line, okay? Or a circle that looks atrocious, you know, or a triangle that is almost a triangle. So these are the things you want to start mastering right from the get-go. Don't worry about lighting yet. Your job in the beginning is pressure control. So if you don't want your stuff looking more like this, which is a bad chicken scratch, there's nothing wrong with chicken scratch drawing. I do it all the time. The main point is to get the job done. Get that point across. Make sure that image is telling you a story into that scene. You know, a picture is worth 1,000 words. That's the whole point behind it. So you have to be the director and create that said picture and make it look well, or as well as you can. Okay. Never beat yourself up in the beginning, because the whole point is you got to work through all the bad sketches and all the bad drawings before you get good. And it's always better to work horribly in the beginning, because now you have no expectations. You're just drawing. You're putting it out there. You're just enjoying the process. And that's the most important part I can ask of anybody that's just starting off. Enjoy the process. Build that process. And this is the key, which is pressure control, is job number one. Once you got pressure control down packed, we move on to the second lesson, okay? And that second lesson is, guess what? You're gonna have to start breaking down the anatomy, okay? So lesson one is pressure control. Use your shapes, okay? If you wanna look at objects, for example, you can look, this is perfect because you have a brush. This has texture. This has a shape, okay? And then these things form a shape. So if you look at it, they're triangle shapes. They're coming in from a point and they're spreading outwards, okay? So all these points are shapes. This is a shape, which is a large rectangle with a circular edge. It's very simple. So now drawing from memory, you'll do something like this. And the handle comes out here, and the brush comes out here, right? And then you add the expansion for the triangle points. So now all of this becomes nothing but a bunch of shapes that won't freak you out, because now you've worked with shapes long enough that it all makes sense. Okay, so now let's say, for example, now I'm gonna just darken it in real quick. A couple of wisps, because that's how it's shown right here. The wispy hairs, very simple. And then here you can just kind of wisp out. See, it doesn't have to be beautiful. Add a couple in the middle, because it has minor gaps in between, so it's just nothing but hair. Right there, and then you can have the logo right here. And there it is. That's it. So I just illustrated the brush as close to it as I possibly could, because I just quickly drew it out. And the whole point is that it makes sense to you in your head and how you're working. Okay? Pressure control, key number one. We'll dive into creating muscles. We'll dive into creating shades with lighting, building the lighting, creating those shade points where sometimes you'll see shadow work here, shadow work coming from this angle, and all this shadow that gets darker back here. How does that work? Well, there's different light points, and those light points create different shadows. All right. So if a light is closer than the other, then you're gonna get softer tones in one spot than the other. The whole point is that we're gonna start working with all of that cohesively to make sense, so all of this stuff can be put together by you, connecting it like Legos, and it all makes sense at the end, okay? So let's dive in real quick on the last part here, which is an exercise that I believe you should be doing at least once a day, just so your brain can be connected to your hand, right? Whether you're starting off or you're intermediate, this is all gonna work out. I do this every so often too, just to maintain my sharpness. Create a couple of shots like this, right? And then start doing this. You could use a 2HB lead, a standardized pencil, because that way, if you don't want to waste your good leads for drawing, then utilize a nice cheapy pencil. HB is the exact same thing, because I'm using a 2H, or rather an HB lead, not a 2. And 2 is the diameter in millimeters here, so this is a 2.0. See that? Because you don't want your stuff being too dark here, and then it gets very light up here. So you see that there's no balance. You see, there's no balance. It's too dark and way too light, too fast. You want to get that nice gradation look. That's the practice. This right here is practice. Okay? Practice this on a daily basis. This is copy paper. Cheapest paper on the planet. Okay? Use copy paper, then recycle it. You're good to go. Or I would say sign it, put the date, put it in a folder. That way, when you look back in your folder, you'll be like, wow, this is when I first started to draw. This is when everything happened for me. You know, when I got the bug to draw and some dude named Sanchez showed me how to go about it. You know, and if anybody's teaching you otherwise by saying, oh, well, all you have to do is just copy whatever you see, there's nothing wrong with copying whatever you see. Okay, you can copy it. That's completely fine. That's what this was about. But don't be fooled by people telling you just to practice. It's vague. It's such a vague information for you to understand and say, well, what am I going to practice? This is what you're going to practice. Pressure control. Till then, see you guys next time.